This is episode 39 of the Shame Proof Your Life podcast, the one where I talk about the trap of speaking up. I'm your host and life coach, Danita Bremer. Have you ever received a prompting that you ignored for a long time, like 17 years? This podcast is that for me. I'm telling my stories, I'm learning from my past, and I'm inviting you along for the ride. My intention is that you will find hope, relief, and understanding by listening to my stories. Okay, so today, I want to talk about something that I actually personally need to process through. And I think it's mostly fully formed. So I think it will be helpful for all of you. Um, in fact, even if it's not, it's totally fine. That's not why I do this podcast. I am hoping that listening to stories is helpful. And in fact, I have a theory that if we simply listened to each other's stories, we would change the world that way. But ultimately, this podcast is about me following this prompting. And I think Heavenly Father knows me really well and knows that I need some kind of accountability, so to speak. So I just have to get a podcast out every week, right? And then it means that I have to think about what stories am I going to tell. Well, this week, it was a week ago today that I'm recording this, that I was on a coaching call with one of my mentors and coaches. And at the very end of the call, there wasn't enough time left to coach another person. And so she asked if anybody had any questions or any reflections or anything to share. And if you've been listening to my podcast, you know that I always have lots of words to share. I always have lots of thoughts about things that I think could possibly be helpful to other people. So I spoke up and I said, "Oh, I was thinking about this concept and I thought maybe it would be helpful for others." And the weirdest thing happened. I don't I don't get very nervous in general on coaching calls. Even, I'm one of the clients or if I'm the coach, like I certainly don't get nervous when I'm the coach. But I always, with this particular coach, I always get really nervous and tongue tied and like I swallow my words. It's just like obvious that I'm really nervous. And so after that call, I decided I wanted to coach myself a little bit around it and see what was going on there. And basically, what I learned, and this also coincides with some other work that I'm doing about nervous system regulation and that kind of thing. And what I realized was that I get nervous because with this particular coach, I feel like I'm going to do it wrong somehow if I speak up. And what I identified, this is the advantage of being very self aware. Not everyone is, it's totally fine if you're not. But what I identified is that I felt stuck between these two competing beliefs, one being either I have to or I want to speak up, and the other being I can't. I can't speak up. And so I dug a little deeper, and all of a sudden I had like a dozen memories surface, and I'm journaling as I'm doing this, so I'm writing them down, I list them out, and then I start to kind of dissect them. And I have a podcast episode about shame around when you talk too much, and this is somewhat related but a little bit different than that. It's more, I want to just pull the curtain back on this sort of, one of my coaches would call it a double bind, this stuck place in between what I would say in terms of my nervous system feeling frozen and feeling like a fight or flight, I want to take action, but I also can't take action. And it showed up as a child in me being described as shy. Now, I think shy is probably a word that aptly described me as a kid. But when I really think about what was going on in those moments that I was, quote unquote, being shy, it was more that I felt this both like I wanted to say something or do something, but I also felt like I couldn't. Now I think of shy as not wanting to be in the spotlight, like not wanting people to be looking at you. And that is definitely a piece of it. But yeah, it's just not, it's not even about shy. Like I don't consider myself shy at all anymore. I don't mind talking to people. I don't mind talking to strangers. I don't mind being like giving talks or being on a stage so much. But as a kid, it was like I had this awareness that everyone was like waiting for me or looking at me, and I couldn't move forward. I couldn't say the thing or do the thing. And so then my parents would just be like, "Oh, she's shy." And so then it kind of became part of my identity. But really, I don't think I was ever shy. I'm quiet sometimes and I'm definitely introverted, but I don't think ultimately my true self is shy. I think ultimately what was happening is this um what I'm calling the trap of speaking up. So there were several memories that I had when I did speak up. And I'm going to just go through them in no particular order. So they're not in age order or anything like that. Um, I think they're probably more in order of how much meaning I placed on them. They're like in the order of when they came up in my mind. So the first one, and these are all, I'm starting out with stories that I did speak up and then something negative happened. So the first one was when I told my grandmother that an extended family member sexually molested me. And she said, "We don't talk about those things." And as I was reflecting this week about that, I realized that that was an instance when I did speak up because like I was like shaking and like almost like angry. I wouldn't quite call it angry, but it was like this like when this in the scriptures it says that the spirit constrains me, that's what it felt like. It felt like I couldn't not say it. And then when she said we don't talk about those things, I felt very alone and I felt like I was the one being wronged, which feels like shame to me. It feels like, oh, I'm wrong for speaking up, for saying my truth. And so, of course, that's very uncomfortable. Now I can look back on that and know that I wasn't wrong. I absolutely acted within my own values and like just morally, ethically right, right? The next one where I did speak up, and please forgive me if you've heard some of these stories. Some of these are repeats, but we're 39 episodes in now. And I think I've told most of the stories that seem to be like a turning point or really meaningful for one or another reason. And so some of these might come up again. And one of them, I'm pretty sure I mentioned on the podcast before, my parents were fighting. They were fighting about me and I felt bad. And so I went out to the living room to try to like explain myself. And my dad walked across the room and he tried to slap me across the face, but I moved and he only barely touched me. So that was like a time when I spoke up because I was hoping that it would be helpful for my parents to like have a little bit more information and for some understanding to happen. And instead, like literally my dad tried to physically hurt me. And so that felt very um alone, like my own parent was against me. And it was just hurtful. It was just very hurtful that like that's the action that was taken. Now I can understand that like my parents had a lot of their own problems and it was like I was talking to a child, not an adult that was supposed to be my protector and somebody who loves me. So like I don't feel hurt by that anymore. Maybe I'm lying to myself when I say that, but I can understand the bigger context now. Another, I have a whole episode about this, is when I was playing with the swing, not sitting on the swing, but swinging the swing and catching it. And then my sister came up and she was standing right where the swing was going to go. And I told her, um, you need to move or else the swing is going to hit you. And she didn't move and the swing hit her right in the mouth. And I was very young. I was only like 6 or 7 years old at the time. And it like scared me. It scared me. I thought like I made that happen. Like with my words, by speaking up, I was able to hurt someone else. And then, of course, I took that and I shamed myself. I told myself that I was wrong and I was bad. Another story is when I started dating before I was 16. And I, previous to this, was pretty close to my grandparents. And so I went to their house one day and I don't remember exactly how the conversation went down, but I know I didn't bring up the fact that I was hanging out with a boy, but my grandmother did. And she said, "We know you're hanging out with that boy." And it just felt like very alienating, very othering. I felt very alone because these grandparents, up until this point, had been like a refuge and a safe place for me, from my parents and my family of origin situation. And now, like, just with that one sentence, they were no longer a safe place. A couple of stories about when I spoke up. And um, one day, I must have been in first or second grade. I came home from school and I felt really sick. And I told my mom, I said, "I don't feel good." And she said, "Oh, well, I made you some top ramen." And I said, "I don't want to eat it. I don't feel good." And she said, "No, you need to eat it." And so I ate the top ramen. And immediately upon finishing the top ramen, I threw up all over the floor. And my mom got so mad at me. And so I don't know if this like falls under the category of like I spoke up and then, I was hurt. Like I felt like my mom wasn't there for me. She wasn't listening to me. She didn't understand me. And that because of that, somehow I was wrong. I was the one that should feel bad and ashamed. A similar instance was, I know I was 7 years old when this happened. I was in charge of washing the dishes and we had a ton of dishes. And I told my mom, "Mom, these dishes are not all going to fit. Like I can't stack them all in the dish drainer. Like they just weren't going to fit." And so she got all huffy puffy and she restacked them all for me so that they would fit. And I finished the last few big pots and pans and stacked them up as best as I could. And I, I turned around to walk away. I was done washing the dishes and then the whole stack just came down. And she got very upset. And then also, I remember one of the pans was glass and it shattered all over. And she was barefoot and walked through it, and her feet got all cut up. And so, it, in my little 7-year-old mind, it felt like I spoke up and I said something and I did something wrong. And so my mom got hurt and now I feel all alone. I feel hurt, right? That's like how I interpreted the situation as a kid. Um, I have an episode about when hurtful words fall out of your mouth. That was a situation where I said some very hurtful words to my sister, and immediately I felt ashamed. I spoke up, I said something, I hurt her, and I felt wrong for it. Again, calling the police on my sister just a few episodes back, I talked about that. I spoke up, I did something, I took an action, and it hurt her. And also, again, this like theme of feeling very alone. Like that was when she never came back to live with us after that. So, not that I was actually physically alone, but I just felt so like different and othered in my family. There was a time I was a teenager. I was probably 17 years old. And I think it was on the weekend, so Saturday or Sunday. And I woke up and I just felt so sick. And I had started my period and my whole entire body was cramping. It wasn't just menstrual cramps, but like my arms and my hands, I remember they were like cramping up and I couldn't like straighten my hands out. And I like told my mom, I was like moaning in bed and I was like, Mom, I don't feel good. And she just like, I don't remember what she said, but she didn't do anything about it. She was just like, oh, okay. What am I supposed to do? And I mean, I didn't have an answer. I'm the kid, right? Like I like legitimately felt like I should go to the doctor or something. And instead, she was just like, I don't know, maybe she brought me some water or something, but I just was left. I literally physically was left alone, like moaning. And I thought I was going to die that day. I seriously thought I was going to die. And yeah, it's just, I just felt so abandoned. And then there was the situation where I told my mom about being sexually abused, and she literally just said, okay. And that I think I have an episode about this where I kind of 12 years old in that moment knew that I was kind of on my own and that I would have to figure it out. So the theme that I see here is when I speak up, I am like ostracized or wronged, or like I just feel so alone. And feeling alone is to our lower brain that is in charge of keeping us alive is like death, right? Because if you leave the tribe, then for sure some kind of lion or tiger will come attack you. And like you're the weak person, you're out on your own, you will die. And I will tell you that oftentimes it did feel like death to me. So now I want to reflect on some of the stories where I didn't speak up. Actually, there's one other story that kind of falls under both categories. And it's when I was 12 or so years old, and my mom and my dad were going through a terrible time in their relationship. And my mom asked me, should I leave your dad? And I remember like having that feeling of like, I can't get the words out. Like, I don't know what to say there. It was very much like, I wanted to tell her, yes, you should leave dad and you should run far, far away and take care of yourself. And I love you so much and you don't deserve this. And also I wanted to say, no, you can't leave dad. Like what's going to happen to us? And like, all of that. And so I felt both. I felt both ways. And so I think in my, mature for my age way, I told her something like, Mom, you just need to do what you feel is right. And it did feel like I was very alone. Like I might have changed the course of our whole family by saying that. And it also felt like maybe I was helping my mom, but maybe I was hurting myself. Maybe I was hurting my dad. And that felt very confusing. Right. So that is a story where I both spoke up and said something, but I also really felt like running away and saying nothing. So the stories where, well, let me just get into them. The first one is a story when I didn't say something. I was in kindergarten and everybody was jumping off the back of the slide. And I climbed up to the top of the slide and I wanted to say, I'm too scared. I can't do this. But I didn't feel like I could say that. And so I just jumped off the back of the slide and hit my ankle on the way down and sprained my ankle really badly. And really, I didn't speak up. I didn't say what I was really feeling and what I needed. And I literally physically got hurt. There's another experience in kindergarten where I wet my pants. Like I remember I was painting on an easel and I was really enjoying it. And I felt like I had to go to the bathroom and I was doing the pee pee dance, but I didn't want to stop painting. And I ran to the bathroom at the last second. But before I could get to the bathroom, pull my pants down and go to the bathroom, I peed in my pants. And it was the day that I was wearing purple pleather pants. So I could have not said anything, but I would have been in a lot of discomfort the rest of kindergarten. So I do think I said something to my teacher and they got me another pair of pants or whatever. But I noticed this theme of like, when I don't speak up, I hurt myself. Um, my first boyfriend, he was very serious with me. I was very young. I was only like 14 when he like talked about like we should get married. And I'm like thinking, I'm 14 years old. I don't want to marry you. Like, heck no. And I don't want to say it freaked me out, but I was just like, no. But I couldn't say it. I didn't want to hurt his feelings so much so that I just was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll think about that. And eventually I did break up with him. So instead, I end up hurting him even more because I, led him along for several more months. But when we finally broke up, it was such a relief to myself, right? Because I knew I wasn't going to marry him. So there's that. There's the story, one of my very, very first episodes about my dad losing his job because he slept through the alarm and I was awake and I didn't speak up. I was literally in this both like, I should wake him up. No, I shouldn't wake him up. Right. And I was afraid. I literally was afraid that if I woke him up, like he was going to yell at me or something. And I didn't wake him up. And so then I ended up carrying for me for like 30, 35 years, this guilt of I had been blaming myself for over 30 years that I changed the course of my family. My dad lost his job. We had to move to Washington. My mom was miserable, all of that. I'm pretty sure I have an episode about that. But it was just like, I didn't speak up. And so therefore other people got hurt and I got hurt. I was thinking about other situations when I don't speak up. And I think one of them is after my mom died and a lot of drama happened between myself and my sisters. And I never really told them how I felt. I never really just got off my chest like, hey, this is how I feel. This is what's going on for me. I kind of just people pleased them and always tried to do things that felt like it was in line with myself, but also didn't feel like I was in too much danger of hurting them or hurting their feelings. And really, what happened is years and years of me kind of betraying myself and like beating myself up and shaming myself because I was the terrible, awful sister because I wasn't really able to just say how I felt and what I really thought of the situation because I thought it would hurt their feelings. And sometimes I see that this plays out in my marriage as well. I can't think of any specific situations, but sometimes I'll go along with things and not really say how I feel. And, in order to kind of like keep the peace or whatever. And what really happens is that I just betray myself. I feel out of alignment with myself. And in a way, I think that is part of what shame is acting in a way that doesn't feel like you and then judging yourself for that. So when I don't speak up, I feel a lot of shame. I feel like I'm hurting myself. So it feels like it's this dichotomy between I can either hurt myself or I can hurt other people. And mostly in my life, I have chosen to hurt myself. The irony of it all is that usually when I hurt myself, I also hurt other people in some way. So there's no getting around hurting someone, right? Somebody's going to be hurt. And at least in many of these situations, somebody is going to be hurt. But what I'm realizing is that when I do speak up, the danger there is feeling alone. So either I feel hurt or I feel like I've hurt someone else, which causes me to feel shame, or I'm all alone, right? I'm abandoned, I'm othered. And that is like a terrible place to be, right? I will say that a lot of this, and this is kind of where coaching has helped me, is that now I can see that those aren't the only two options. I can speak up and feel good about speaking up and let other people have, if they're hurt, then they're hurt, but it's not because I intentionally hurt them. I can now kind of look back with perspective and say that almost every time when I speak up, it's because I want to help. It's because I want to, um, yeah, it's just because I want to help. I want to be helpful in some way. I want to help resolve a problem. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just that as a child, we don't always have words or understanding for these things. We only understand the action and then the feeling that it feels, right? So now I know that there are other options other than either I'm alone or I'm hurt or I'm ashamed, right? There's like a multitude of options in between. And the other thing is, as I did some self coaching around talking too much and why do I talk too much? And what I realized was that in the instances where I speak up, it's usually because I feel like I want to help. And I would rather speak up and help someone or not, but like have the opportunity to help someone. Because not every time I speak up am I helping someone, right? But it feels like, oh, this could help someone. I don't always know if it does. And I'm sure there are times when it doesn't help anyone. And so I thought about also the opposite of that, of like feeling like I could speak up and help, but not doing it because, I feel like I take up too much space and I have too many words, too much verbal space. And what that felt like was it felt terrible. Like, oh, but what if there was somebody I could have helped and then I decided not to because of my own discomfort? So what I realized was that I actually like this about myself, that I have a lot of words, that I speak up, because what's behind that is that I have experiences, I have stories. I mean, that's what this entire podcast is about. I have experiences and stories that if I talk about them, could help someone else. And that is worth it to me. That it's worth it to me to feel uncomfortable about taking up too much space, but potentially I help people versus holding back and not speaking and feeling like I'm out of alignment with myself. So that is actually really fascinating to me. I don't know, it gives me kind of a lightness. It gives me a freedom to speak up and to just be myself in the world, however many words that requires. And it's been helpful to kind of talk through some of these stories and see some themes. And now I have this kind of conscious awareness that my brain, when I speak up, is going to say, be careful, you might, you might be kicked out of the tribe, you might be alone. Or it's going to say, be careful, you're going to hurt someone, be careful, this is going to feel bad to you. And that's okay, right? Like now that it's in my conscious realm, I can notice it and I can make decisions based off of that. Okay, that's enough for now. And so are you. Thank you so much for your honest ratings and reviews. And if you haven't downloaded my starter guide for a shame-proof life, you want to do that. I talk about feeling your feelings and how your thoughts and your feelings are related. And it's super useful. It's my way of speaking up in the world. I have the link to that in the show notes. And yeah, go download that. Until next time, go be you and follow the spirit.